Welcome to Labor News at Work. Today is October the 22nd, 2024. I'm Merrick Masters, Professor of Business Emeritus, commentator and podcaster. You can reach me at my email account listed here and also at my YouTube channel, Merrick Masters. The topics of today's episode are selected strikes 2024 based on Bureau of Labor Statistics data. These are major strikes of 1,000 or more employees. Selected settlements, including the Longshore, which has a temporary pause in its strike. Boeing and Omni Hotel workers. We'll talk about the war between Stellantis and the UAW over product commitments. We'll talk about organizing, the status of NLRB elections for the fiscal year that just closed 2024, an update on Starbucks, the efforts of workers there to unionize, and a little note on Wells Fargo attempts of selected workers to organize the large company Wells Fargo. And then return to work, our return to office policies. Question, where do you stand based on a recent statement made by the CEO of Amazon? Major strikes in the U.S. The Bureau of Labor Statistics has reported data through September indicating that at the end of September, and this would be before the very short strike by the longshoremen occurred, there were a total of 82,600 workers on strike in 9 strikes at the end of that month. Some of these strikes have been settled since then. Ongoing strikes include workers at 7 Southern California stores of CVS. They're striking for better pay and health care benefits. And then you have various strikes among hotel workers across the country. Some have reached contract settlements. You can get an update of this from the Unite Here website, which represents some of the workers on strikes at hotels. And they've indicated that there are currently a little over 4,400 workers on strike in hotels at the Hilton in Boston, Hyatt and Marriott in different locations. And also there have recently been settlements covering 35 hotels with workers totaling a little over 12,000. Selected settlements that you can check out. Here are links to those. The Omni Hotel workers suspended their strike to ratify a tentative contract. The dock workers suspended their strike until January 15th. They negotiated a 62% increase over the life of the contract, but remain divided with the company on procedures and rules affecting automation. The machinists are voting on a new proposal that was tentatively agreed to raise wages 35% over the life of the contract. If it's ratified, it could end the strike, which involved about 33,000 workers. And recently, the auto workers members at Cornell University ratified a contract that secured first-time COLA increase and ends tiers. There's an ongoing war between Stellantis and the UAW over product commitments, focusing in particular on the commitment that Stellantis has made to reopen the plant at Belvidere. There's a controversy on whether or not the delay in that planned investment represents a breach of the contract violations. Stellantis claims that the contract language gives it the authority to make changes, including delays. The UAW claims that they have the right to strike over any delays or deferments or cancellations of product commitments that were enumerated in a memorandum of understanding number 311 that was consummated in November of 2023. You can see the timeline here, which indicates that as of October the 4th, Stellantis has filed now 24 lawsuits against UAW locals in which they argued that a strike by any of those locals would be an illegal violation of the contract between the union and the company, and they would seek damages for any economic losses incurred during the life of a strike. On the organizing front, the National Labor Relations Board released a summary of the data collected on the number of certification elections that were held in fiscal year 2024, which ended on September 30th, 2024. It reports that there were a total of 1,788 elections held. Unions won 73% of those. The total number of workers eligible to vote was 121,000 plus, and the total number that voted for the union were over 61,000. This may seem like a large number in and of itself, but by historical standards, they're relatively small. During the heyday of unions in the 50s and 60s, you had a lot more workers seeking election representation. And it's important to put the total number of employees involved here in perspective compared to the total workforce. Under 122,000 workers in total were involved in these elections, and the workforce today is close to 162 million. So this is really a fraction, a very minimal fraction of the total eligible workforce to support union organizing activities, and only 10% of the employed workforce is represented by unions at the present time. Starbucks, there's been a lot of attention in the past year or so to union efforts to organize Starbucks, and this is a summary of the status recently, indicating that at 508 stores, Starbucks employees have voted for union representation, and that includes representation involving over 11,000, nearly 12,000 employees. Now, that's a pretty significant development in and of itself. That is a minority of the workers in Starbucks facilities in the United States in terms of total number. And also there is an issue associated with securing contracts. Despite these elections, there has not been a single contract negotiated between Starbucks and the workers to represent them. This illustrates the problem of securing a contract once you win a union election, particularly if you're a smaller local, and these are very small locals represented in individual locations across the country that may have a hard time mobilizing the resources to negotiate a contract. Organizing at Wells Fargo, there's been attention in the media to this effort. A few numbers to put this in perspective. Overall, Wells Fargo has about 226,000 employees. And the union drive that they're referring to here was an effort on the part of 48 workers at one of its facilities in a department of contract enforcement workers that is seeking union representation. And then you had an effort that succeeded in which at one branch in Alaska, workers voted 5-3 to affiliate with communication workers. You have information here on a charge that has been filed against Wells Fargo by a union for a breach of labor law. This is a tense situation where it occurs, but it is really microscopic in terms of its overall presence in Wells Fargo. And return to office policies, there's a lot of attention to this in the media. A number of major companies have sought to bring people back to work after the pandemic. You can find various reports on the list of these companies. Amazon is one recently that announced it's returning to a 5-day a week in the office policy. And the CEO of that company made a statement which has provoked a lot of controversy, in which the CEO said that we want to innovate. We want to really, really innovate on interesting products. I have not seen an ability for us to do that when we're not in person, Amazon CEO said during a meeting. And so if there are people who just don't work well in that environment and don't want to, that's okay. There are other companies around. So people can, seek their job elsewhere. And the implication is here is that if they don't comply, there may be adverse employment consequences. Question I pose to you is, where do you stand on this? We'll poll this a little bit later on my YouTube channel. Thank you for listening to this episode. Here's a little bit about myself, my academic background, the books that I'm working on and that I've written, and my various other activities. Have a good day.